Sometimes the greatest betrayals come from the people we trust most. The morning I discovered my stepfather had sold my mother's estate without my knowledge, I thought my world had ended. What he didn't know was that my mother had prepared for exactly this moment, and her real will contained provisions that would transform his act of greed into the catalyst for my ultimate vindication. But let me start from the beginning, because the journey from devastation to triumph taught me that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what you're truly capable of achieving. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of September 15th started like any other Tuesday in my comfortable suburban Chicago home. I was 28 years old, working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized consulting firm, living in the same neighborhood where I had grown up. My life followed predictable patterns that provided security and modest satisfaction, though I often wondered if there might be something more meaningful waiting beyond my carefully structured routine. My mother, Catherine Whitmore, had passed away 18 months earlier after a brief but devastating battle with pancreatic cancer. Her death had shattered my world in ways I was still processing, leaving me adrift in a reality that felt fundamentally different without her steady presence and unconditional support. The grief counselor had warned me that significant losses often trigger delayed reactions, but I had convinced myself that I was managing the transition reasonably well. Catherine had been the cornerstone of our small family ever since my biological father left when I was 7 years old. She had worked tirelessly as a real estate agent to provide for us, eventually building a successful practice that allowed her to purchase the beautiful Victorian home where I had spent my teenage years. Her determination and work ethic had shaped my understanding of what was possible when someone committed fully to their goals, though I had never quite found my own version of that passionate dedication. When my mother married Robert Chambers 3 years before her death, I had been cautiously optimistic about the addition to our family. Robert was a successful insurance broker who seemed genuinely devoted to my mother and respectful of our close relationship. He had never attempted to replace my father or impose his authority inappropriately, instead developing what felt like a supportive friendship that complemented rather than competed with the bond Catherine and I shared. The Victorian house on Maui. Maple Street had become our family sanctuary, filled with memories of holidays, celebrations, and quiet evenings spent planning our futures together. Catherine had lovingly restored the original hardwood floors, updated the kitchen with modern appliances while preserving the vintage charm, and created a garden that bloomed magnificently each spring with flowers she had carefully selected and nurtured over the years. After her funeral, Robert had suggested that I continue living in the house while we sorted through the estate details and determined the best long-term arrangements. The gesture had seemed thoughtful and practical, allowing me to maintain stability during the difficult adjustment period while providing Robert with companionship in the home they had shared together. The mortgage had been paid off years earlier, so maintaining the property required only taxes, insurance, and routine maintenance expenses that seemed manageable between our combined resources. I had trusted Robert completely during the estate settlement process, grateful for his handling of legal and financial details that felt overwhelming in my grief-stricken state. He had explained that Catherine's will was straightforward, leaving her assets to be divided between us according to her wishes, with specific provisions for ensuring that I would inherit the family home and sufficient resources to maintain it comfortably. The paperwork had seemed complex but legitimate when Robert presented various documents for my signature. He had explained each form as necessary for transferring ownership, settling tax obligations, or updating insurance policies to reflect the changed circumstances. My trust in his expertise and genuine concern for my welfare had made me comfortable, signing whatever he recommended without seeking independent legal review. That trust had been my critical mistake. The phone call that changed everything came from Sarah Martinez, a real estate agent who had worked with my mother for several years before Catherine's illness. Sarah's voice carried confusion and concern when she reached me at work that Tuesday morning, asking questions that initially made no sense to me. Elena, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I'm seeing some unusual activity regarding your mother's property on Maple Street. There's a listing in the multiple listing service showing that the house sold last week, but I know you're still living there. I wanted to make sure there wasn't some mistake in the system. My first reaction was to laugh at what seemed like an obvious error. Real estate databases were notoriously unreliable, often showing outdated or incorrect information that created confusion among agents and buyers. I assured Sarah that there must be some technical glitch, since I was obviously still residing in the house and had no knowledge of any sale transaction. Elena, I understand this is confusing, but I've checked multiple sources, and they're all showing the same information. The property sold for $450,000 to a development company called Meridian Holdings. The closing occurred last Thursday, and the deed transfer has already been recorded with the county clerk's office. The words hit me like ice water. $450,000. Last Thursday. Deed transfer recorded. Each phrase hammered against my consciousness with growing horror as I began to understand that Sarah was describing real transactions rather than database errors. My hands began trembling as I asked Sarah to repeat the information while I frantically scribbled notes on the back of an envelope. The sale date was September 8th. The buyer was Meridian Holdings LLC. The selling agent was listed as Robert Chambers, acting as authorized representative for the estate of Catherine Whitmore Chambers. Sarah, there has to be some mistake. Robert would never sell the house without discussing it with me first. We're still settling the estate, and he knows how important the house is to me. This can't be right. The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably before Sarah responded with obvious reluctance. Elena, I've worked in real estate for 15 years, and I've never seen a mistake like this in the official records. I think you need to speak with Robert immediately and possibly consult with an attorney about what's happening here. I hung up the phone in a daze, my mind racing through possible explanations that might make this information less catastrophic than it appeared. Perhaps Robert had arranged some kind of refinancing or ownership restructuring that required temporary title changes. Maybe there was a complex tax strategy I didn't understand that necessitated apparent sale transactions. Surely there was some reasonable explanation that would resolve this apparent crisis. The drive home from my office took 30 minutes through Chicago's afternoon traffic, but it felt like hours as I rehearsed different ways to approach Robert about Sarah's call. I wanted to give him the opportunity to explain before jumping to conclusions about betrayal or deception. Our relationship had been built on trust and mutual respect, and I owed him the benefit of the doubt, despite the alarming information I had received. The house appeared exactly as I had left it that morning, with Robert's car in the driveway and the garden hose stretched across the lawn where he had been watering the flower beds my mother had planted. Everything looked completely normal, which made the possibility of a secret sale transaction even more surreal and frightening. I found Robert in the kitchen, preparing what appeared to be a celebratory dinner with an expensive bottle of wine, already opened and breathing on the counter. His cheerful greeting and obvious good mood created a jarring contrast with the anxiety and confusion that had been building during my drive home. Elena, perfect timing. I was just about to call you with some wonderful news. Pour yourself a glass of wine and sit down. I have something important to share with you. The irony of his enthusiasm made my stomach clench with dread. I accepted the wine glass he offered but remained standing, needing to maintain some psychological distance while I processed whatever information he was about to share. Robert, before you tell me your news, I need to ask you about something. I received a call today from Sarah Martinez, one of my mother's former colleagues. She says there are records showing that this house was sold last week to a development company. Can you help me understand what that's about? The change in Robert's expression was immediate and telling. His celebratory demeanor shifted to defensive calculation as he set down his wine glass and studied my face with newfound wariness. The silence stretched between us as I watched him decide how to respond to my question. Elena, that's actually related to the news I wanted to share with you. I've been working with some financial advisors and tax attorneys to optimize the estate settlement in ways that will benefit both of us significantly. The transaction Sarah mentioned is part of a larger strategy that's going to provide us with much better outcomes than the original estate plan. His words felt like verbal gymnastics designed to obscure rather than clarify what had actually occurred. I set my untouched wine glass on the counter and crossed my arms, signaling that I needed direct answers rather than vague explanations about financial optimization. Robert, I need you to be specific about what happened. Did you sell my mother's house without telling me? And if so, how was that possible when we're supposed to be settling the estate together? The defensive posture became more pronounced as Robert realized that evasion was not going to satisfy my concerns. He moved to the other side of the kitchen island, creating physical distance that mirrored the emotional separation I was beginning to feel. Elena, I understand this is confusing, but you have to trust me on this. The sale was necessary to prevent significant tax penalties that would have reduced the estate value substantially. I've been working with experts who identified opportunities to maximize our inheritance through strategic restructuring that required immediate action. The word "our" hit me like a physical blow. My mother's house, my childhood home, the sanctuary where I had planned to build my future, had become our inheritance in Robert's mind. The possessive language revealed assumptions about ownership and decision-making authority that I had never agreed to or understood. Robert, I don't understand how you had the authority to sell property that belongs to me under my mother's will. What exactly did those documents I signed actually say? His hesitation before responding confirmed my growing suspicion that I had been manipulated into signing away rights I hadn't understood I was relinquishing. The man I had trusted to guide me through the estate settlement process had apparently used my grief and confusion to advance his own interests at my expense. The documents you signed included provisions that allowed me to act on behalf of the estate in situations where immediate action was necessary to protect the assets. The sale to Meridian Holdings was structured as a temporary arrangement that will ultimately benefit both of us once the tax advantages are realized. The explanations were becoming increasingly convoluted and less believable with each elaboration. I pulled out my phone and began searching for information about Meridian Holdings LLC, needing to understand who had purchased my mother's house and what their intentions might be for the property. The search results were limited but illuminating. Meridian Holdings was a recently formed company with minimal public information available, but what I could find suggested they specialized in purchasing residential properties for redevelopment or rental income generation. They were not a temporary holding company designed to optimize tax strategies, but rather a legitimate business seeking profitable real estate investments. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Robert, I'm looking at information about Meridian Holdings, and they appear to be a development company that buys houses for renovation and resale. This doesn't sound like the temporary tax strategy you described. I think you need to be completely honest with me about what's happening here. The confrontation had reached a point where continued deception was no longer sustainable. Robert's expression shifted from defensive calculation to something that looked almost like relief, as if maintaining the pretense had become more exhausting than revealing the truth. Elena, I didn't plan for this to happen the way it did. When your mother died, I discovered that she had made some financial commitments that created significant obligations for the estate. The house sale was necessary to cover those debts and provide sufficient resources for both of us to move forward with our lives. The revelation that my mother had supposedly left significant debts was shocking and difficult to believe. Catherine had been meticulous about financial planning and had often discussed her pride in maintaining excellent credit and building equity in the family home. The idea that she would have hidden substantial financial problems seemed completely inconsistent with everything I knew about her character and priorities. What kind of debts are you talking about? My mother was extremely responsible with money, and she never mentioned any significant financial problems to me. I need to see documentation of these obligations you're describing. Robert's discomfort with my request for documentation was obvious and telling. He moved restlessly around the kitchen, avoiding direct eye contact while formulating responses that would satisfy my demands without providing the transparency I was seeking. The debts were related to some business investments your mother made during her final years. She didn't want to worry you with the details while she was fighting her illness, but she had borrowed against the house to fund some real estate ventures that didn't work out as planned. The explanation felt fabricated, designed to justify decisions that had already been made rather than describe circumstances that had actually existed. My mother had never mentioned any business investments or financial ventures beyond her established real estate practice, and the idea that she would have risked our family home on speculative investments seemed completely out of character. Robert, I don't believe what you're telling me. My mother would never have jeopardized this house with risky investments, and she certainly would have discussed any significant financial problems with me. I think you need to show me the actual documentation of these supposed debts and explain exactly how the sale of the house addresses them. The demand for proof created a moment of silence that felt charged with tension and mutual recognition that our relationship had fundamentally changed. Robert was no longer the trusted family member helping me navigate difficult circumstances, but rather someone whose actions and explanations were subject to scrutiny and doubt. Elena, I can show you the financial records tomorrow when the bank opens. Tonight, I think we both need to calm down and approach this situation rationally. The decisions I made were in both of our best interests, even if the timing and communication could have been better handled. The suggestion that I needed to calm down and approach the situation rationally felt condescending and manipulative, designed to position my legitimate concerns as emotional overreactions rather than appropriate responses to potentially fraudulent behavior. The implication that the sale of my inheritance was in my best interest, despite having occurred without my knowledge or consent, revealed a level of arrogance that I was only beginning to comprehend. Robert, I'm going to contact an attorney tomorrow to review the estate documents and understand exactly what authority you had to sell property that I believed was mine. I'm also going to research these supposed debts you mentioned and verify whether they actually exist. Until then, I think it would be best if we avoided further discussion about this situation. The evening concluded with an uncomfortable dinner during which we both maintained polite conversation while avoiding the obvious tension that had developed between us. Robert seemed confident that his explanations would prove satisfactory once I had time to process the information and consult with professionals who could verify his claims about tax strategies and debt obligations. I spent the night lying awake, in the bedroom where I had grown up, surrounded by memories of my mother and the life we had built together in this house. The possibility that everything I had inherited from her could be lost through deception or legal manipulation felt like a betrayal that extended beyond mere financial loss to something that struck at the core of my identity and sense of security. The next morning brought a call from my attorney, Michael Chen, who had handled some minor legal matters for my mother in previous years. His review of the estate documents I had signed revealed the devastating truth that Robert had been concealing, behind his elaborate explanations about tax optimization and debt management. Elena, I've reviewed the papers you signed, and I'm afraid I have some very bad news. These documents gave Robert broad authority to act on behalf of the estate, including the power to sell assets without requiring your specific consent for individual transactions. The language is legally binding and would be very difficult to challenge successfully in court. The confirmation that I had unknowingly signed away my rights to my inheritance felt like a physical blow that left me struggling to process the implications. My trust in Robert had been systematically exploited to strip me of the financial security and family legacy that my mother had worked her entire life to provide. Michael, is there any way to reverse the sale or challenge Robert's authority to have made these decisions without proper disclosure? I signed those documents while I was grieving and didn't understand what I was agreeing to. The pause before Michael's response suggested that he was considering various legal options while trying to prepare me for disappointing news about the limited remedies available for my situation. Elena, fraud cases are notoriously difficult to prove, especially when the documents appear to have been signed voluntarily. Even if we could demonstrate that Robert misrepresented the nature of the documents, the sale to Meridian Holdings was completed by a legitimate buyer who would have legal protection as a good-faith purchaser. Unwinding the transaction would be extremely complicated and expensive, with no guarantee of success. The legal reality meant that my inheritance had been effectively stolen through manipulation of my trust and grief, but that the remedies available through the court system were limited and uncertain. Robert had apparently structured the transaction carefully to minimize legal vulnerabilities, while maximizing his personal benefit from the sale proceeds. What about the supposed debts that Robert claims necessitated the sale? Can we verify whether those obligations actually exist? Michael's response provided the first encouraging information I had received since discovering the sale. I can definitely help you investigate any claims about estate debts. If Robert has been misrepresenting financial obligations to justify the sale, that could provide grounds for legal action. However, even if we prove the debts were fabricated, recovering the property would still be extremely difficult. The investigation into my mother's supposed debts revealed exactly what I had suspected from the beginning. Catherine's financial records showed no evidence of the business investments or borrowing against the house that Robert had described. Her estate was solvent and well-managed, with no significant obligations that would have required selling the family home to satisfy creditors. The revelation that Robert had fabricated the debt story to justify his unauthorized sale of my inheritance represented a level of deception and betrayal that left me feeling completely disoriented about our relationship and his motivations. The man I had trusted as a family member had systematically exploited my grief and confusion to steal the financial security my mother had worked her entire life to provide. The emotional impact of discovering the extent of Robert's betrayal was overwhelming and paralyzing. I felt simultaneously angry, devastated, and completely unprepared to navigate the legal and financial challenges that confronted me. The comfortable life I had taken for granted had been destroyed by someone I had trusted completely, leaving me with limited resources and an uncertain future. The next several weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, financial investigations, and increasingly hostile confrontations with Robert as the full extent of his deception became apparent. He had received $450,000 from the sale of my mother's house, but none of that money had been applied to non-existent estate debts or set aside for my benefit as he had promised. Instead, Robert had used the proceeds to pay off his own mortgage, purchase a luxury car, and invest in his insurance business expansion. The money that should have provided me with financial security and housing stability had been completely diverted to improve his personal circumstances while leaving me with nothing. The legal advice I received was consistently discouraging about the prospects for recovering my inheritance through court action. The documents I had signed were legally binding. The sale to Meridian Holdings was completed through legitimate channels, and proving fraud would require evidence that Robert had deliberately misrepresented material facts, which would be difficult to establish to a court's satisfaction. The final devastating blow came when Robert informed me that I would need to vacate the house within 30 days, since the new owners intended to begin renovation work immediately. The home where I had grown up, where my mother had built her life and legacy, would be transformed into rental property that would generate income for strangers, while I struggled to find new housing with limited financial resources. Standing in my childhood bedroom for what I knew would be the last time, surrounded by memories of the life my mother and I had shared, I felt completely defeated by circumstances that seemed impossible to overcome. The betrayal by someone I had trusted, the loss of my inheritance, and the prospect of starting over with nothing felt like challenges that exceeded my capacity to endure or overcome. That night, as I packed my belongings and prepared to leave the only home I had ever known, I discovered something that would change everything. Hidden behind a loose baseboard in my mother's bedroom closet was an envelope marked, "For Elena, in case of emergency," in my mother's distinctive handwriting. Inside the envelope was a letter dated just weeks before her death, along with copies of legal documents that revealed the truth about my mother's final wishes and the provisions she had made to protect me from exactly the situation I was facing. The letter began with words that brought tears to my eyes and hope to my heart. "My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, it means that someone has betrayed your trust and tried to steal what I have worked my entire life to provide for you. Do not despair, my darling, because I have prepared for this possibility, and justice will prevail." What followed was the most remarkable demonstration of a mother's love and foresight that I could have imagined, revealing provisions that would transform my apparent devastation into the foundation for a future that exceeded anything I had previously thought possible. As I read through the documents my mother had hidden for me to find, I realized that Robert's betrayal had not destroyed my inheritance, but had actually triggered protections and opportunities that my mother had carefully planned to ensure my security and success regardless of what others might attempt to steal from me. The phoenix was about to rise from the ashes, but first I had to understand the full extent of what my mother had prepared for exactly this moment. The letter in my mother's handwriting trembled between my fingers as I read words that seemed to reach across the divide between life and death, to offer comfort and hope in my darkest hour. Catherine Whitmore had always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else, but the foresight and preparation revealed in her hidden message exceeded even my highest expectations of her protective instincts. "Elena, my precious daughter," the letter continued, "I know that you are feeling betrayed and abandoned right now, but I need you to understand that everything that has happened was anticipated and planned for. Robert revealed his true nature to me during my final months, though I chose not to burden you with that knowledge while you were already struggling with my illness." The revelation that my mother had discovered Robert's deceptive intentions before her death brought a mixture of relief and anguish. Relief that her trust in him had not been as complete as I had believed, but anguish that she had carried this burden alone during her final weeks when she should have been focused on her own comfort and peace. During our marriage, I became aware that Robert viewed our relationship as a business arrangement rather than a genuine partnership. He made comments about the value of the house and my real estate business that revealed his primary interest in the financial benefits of our union, rather than emotional connection. When I realized that he was likely planning to manipulate you after my death, I took steps to ensure that his greed would ultimately serve your best interests rather than his own. The documents attached to the letter revealed the extraordinary measures Catherine had taken to protect my inheritance while creating the appearance of vulnerability that would encourage Robert to reveal his true intentions. The official will that had been filed with the probate court was indeed legitimate, but it represented only a fraction of the assets and provisions my mother had actually established for my benefit. The first document was a trust agreement dated 6 months before Catherine's death, establishing the Elena Whitmore Foundation with assets that had been carefully transferred from her personal ownership to the trust's control. The trust held ownership of 3 rental properties in Chicago's growing neighborhoods, a diversified investment portfolio worth approximately $800,000, and the rights to a life insurance policy with a death benefit of $500,000. The trust document named me as the sole beneficiary with full control over all assets and decisions once I reached the age of 30, or if specific triggering events occurred that demonstrated I needed access to the resources for my protection and security. Robert's sale of the Maple Street house without my knowledge or consent constituted exactly such a triggering event, immediately vesting me with complete control over the trust assets. The second document was even more remarkable in its strategic implications. Catherine had established a business entity called Whitmore Holdings LLC, which held exclusive rights to purchase the Maple Street property if it was ever offered for sale by the estate or its representatives. The purchase option was structured at a price of $10 above any competing offer, with immediate access to financing through a pre-approved credit facility established specifically for this purpose. The purchase option had been deliberately concealed from Robert's knowledge and would only become active if he attempted to sell the property without following the proper estate settlement procedures that would have required my informed consent and participation. My mother had essentially created a legal trap that would allow me to reclaim the family home while simultaneously exposing Robert's unauthorized sale for what it truly was. The third document was perhaps the most ingenious component of Catherine's protective strategy. She had established a consulting agreement between Whitmore Holdings LLC and Meridian Holdings LLC, the company that had purchased the Maple Street property from Robert. The consulting agreement gave Whitmore Holdings the right to audit all transactions involving properties purchased from estate sales, with the authority to void any transactions that involved misrepresentation or fraud in the original estate settlement process. The consulting agreement had been negotiated and signed before Catherine's death, but the Meridian Holdings representatives had no knowledge of the family relationships involved or the specific properties that might be affected by the audit provisions. They had viewed it as a standard due diligence measure for protecting their investments rather than a targeted strategy for recovering specific assets. The implications of these documents was staggering and overwhelming. My mother had not only protected my inheritance from Robert's manipulation, but had actually created a situation where his betrayal would trigger much more substantial benefits than I would have received through a straightforward estate settlement. The trust assets alone exceeded the value of the house he had sold, and the purchase option would allow me to reclaim the family home while exposing his deception to legal scrutiny. The final component of Catherine's hidden provisions was a detailed letter of instruction that explained how to activate the trust benefits, exercise the purchase option, and coordinate with the legal representatives who had been secretly retained to handle these matters when the triggering events occurred. The instructions were written with the clarity and attention to detail that had characterized all of my mother's important communications throughout my life. Elena, I know this seems overwhelming right now, but I have arranged for professional support to help you navigate these processes. Contact Margaret Reynolds at Reynolds & Associates first thing tomorrow morning. She has been expecting your call and has all the documents necessary to begin implementing these provisions immediately. Margaret handled all the legal work for establishing these protections and understands exactly what needs to be done. Margaret Reynolds answered her phone on the second ring when I called the next morning, her voice carrying a warmth and familiarity that suggested she had indeed been expecting to hear from me for some time. Elena, I have been waiting for your call since your mother's death. Catherine prepared me thoroughly for this situation, and I want you to know that everything is going to work out exactly as she planned. Can you meet me in my office this afternoon? To review the documents and begin the process of reclaiming what rightfully belongs to you? The meeting with Margaret Reynolds felt like stepping into an alternate reality where the devastating betrayal I had experienced was transformed into the catalyst for opportunities I had never imagined possible. Margaret's conference room contained organized files documenting every aspect of Catherine's protective strategy, with detailed timelines for implementing each component of the plan. Your mother was one of the most strategic and forward-thinking clients I have ever worked with, Margaret explained as she walked me through the trust documents and purchase options. She understood that protecting your inheritance required more than just proper legal documentation. She needed to create incentives and consequences that would influence Robert's behavior in ways that ultimately served your interests rather than his own. The trust activation process required filing specific documents with the probate court that would establish my legal standing to challenge Robert's unauthorized sale of estate assets. The filing would trigger automatic reviews of all transactions he had conducted on behalf of the estate, with particular scrutiny applied to any sales that involved potential conflicts of interest or inadequate disclosure to beneficiaries. The purchase option for the Maple Street property could be exercised immediately upon proof that the original sale had been conducted without proper authorization from all estate beneficiaries. Margaret had already prepared the necessary documentation and secured the financing that would allow me to complete the purchase within 30 days of initiating the process. The consulting agreement with Meridian Holdings provided the legal authority to audit their purchase of the property and void the transaction if fraud or misrepresentation was discovered in the original sale process. Margaret was confident that Robert's fabrication of estate debts and his failure to properly disclose the sale to me would meet the legal standards for voiding the transaction entirely. Elena, within 60 days, you will own the family home free and clear, have access to trust assets worth more than $1 million, and have legal grounds for pursuing Robert for damages related to his unauthorized use of estate property. Your mother's strategy has transformed his betrayal into the foundation for your financial independence and long-term security. The emotional impact of learning that my mother had anticipated and prepared for exactly the situation I was facing was overwhelming in the most positive way imaginable. The grief and rage I had been carrying since discovering Robert's deception transformed into gratitude and amazement at the depth of Catherine's love and protection that extended beyond her. Death. The next several weeks involved intensive coordination with Margaret Reynolds and the other professional advisors Catherine had secretly retained to implement her protective strategy. Each step revealed additional layers of planning and foresight that demonstrated how thoroughly she had considered every possible scenario and outcome. The probate court filing that challenged Robert's authority to sell estate assets created immediate complications for his financial planning and forced him to retain legal representation to defend his actions. The discovery process revealed the extent of his deception while providing documented evidence of his misrepresentation regarding estate debts and his failure to properly disclose the sale to me as required by law. Robert's initial arrogance and confidence quickly transformed into anxiety and defensive posturing as he realized that his carefully planned betrayal was unraveling in ways that exposed him to significant legal and financial consequences. The sale proceeds he had used for his personal benefit would need to be returned to the estate, along with substantial penalties and legal fees resulting from his unauthorized actions. The purchase option exercise created a fascinating dynamic with Meridian Holdings, who discovered that their routine property acquisition had inadvertently involved them in an estate fraud case that could void their ownership rights entirely. Rather than risk losing their investment completely, they agreed to sell the property to Whitmore Holdings at cost, plus reasonable carrying expenses, allowing them to exit the situation without financial loss while avoiding potential legal complications. The consulting agreement audit revealed that Meridian Holdings had conducted appropriate due diligence regarding Robert's claimed authority to sell the property, but that their investigation had been based on fraudulent representations he had provided about estate debts and beneficiary notifications. The audit findings supported voiding the original transaction while protecting Meridian Holdings from liability for their good faith reliance on Robert's misrepresentations. Within 45 days of discovering my mother's hidden provisions, I was the legal owner of the family home, had full access to trust assets exceeding $1 million, and had documentation supporting substantial financial claims against Robert for his unauthorized use of estate funds. The transformation, from devastated betrayal victim to financially independent beneficiary, felt like emerging from a nightmare into a dream that exceeded my wildest hopes. The process of moving back into the Maple Street house felt like a homecoming that was both familiar and completely new. The rooms where I had grown up now belonged to me absolutely, without any dependence on Robert's goodwill or complicated estate settlement negotiations. The security and independence I felt walking through the restored Victorian home was unlike anything I had experienced during my adult life. The trust assets provided financial resources that would allow me to pursue educational opportunities, career changes, or entrepreneurial ventures that had previously seemed impossible with my modest salary and limited savings. The investment portfolio was structured to generate sufficient income for comfortable living, while preserving capital for long-term growth and security. The life insurance proceeds created opportunities for philanthropic activities and community, involvement that would honor my mother's memory while creating positive impact for others who might face similar challenges. Catherine had specifically included provisions encouraging me to use a portion of the trust assets for supporting other people who had experienced estate fraud or family betrayal. The legal action against Robert was proceeding through civil courts, with Margaret Reynolds pursuing recovery of the estate funds he had improperly converted for his personal use. The documented evidence of his deception was overwhelming, and his legal representation had indicated willingness to negotiate a settlement that would provide substantial monetary recovery while avoiding the publicity and expense of a trial. The emotional healing that accompanied the financial recovery was equally significant and transformative. The grief and rage that had consumed me since discovering Robert's betrayal was gradually replaced by appreciation for my mother's extraordinary love and protection. The trust she had placed in my ability to handle these challenging circumstances and emerge stronger felt like a final gift that continued providing strength and confidence. The professional relationships Catherine had established with Margaret, Reynolds, and the other advisors continued providing valuable guidance and support as I learned to manage the trust assets and make decisions about my future direction. Their expertise and commitment to my mother's vision ensured that her protective strategy would continue serving my interests for years to come. The community of people who had worked with Catherine during her final months to establish these protections became an extended support network that provided both practical assistance and emotional encouragement. Their dedication to implementing her plans revealed the respect and affection she had earned throughout her professional and personal relationships. The discovery that my mother had anticipated Robert's betrayal while protecting me from its consequences taught me profound lessons about the difference between surface appearances and underlying reality. People who seemed trustworthy could harbor deceptive intentions, while others who worked behind the scenes could provide extraordinary protection and support. The experience also revealed my own capacity for resilience and growth under pressure that I had never previously tested. The challenges of navigating legal proceedings, financial management, and emotional recovery had developed capabilities and confidence that would serve me throughout my future endeavors. Standing in the garden behind the Maple Street house, surrounded by the flowers my mother had planted and nurtured, I felt a connection to her love and wisdom that transcended the physical separation death had created between us. Her protective strategy had not only secured my financial future, but had also provided a demonstration of unconditional love that would guide my own relationships and decisions throughout my life. The inheritance Robert had attempted to steal had been transformed through my mother's foresight into something far more valuable than real estate or financial assets. It had become a foundation of security, independence, and possibility that would enable me to build a future aligned with my values and aspirations rather than constrained by financial limitations or dependence on others. The hidden truth my mother had left for me to discover was that genuine protection comes not from preventing all possible harm, but from preparing those we love to overcome whatever challenges they might face. Her strategy had transformed betrayal into opportunity, loss into gain, and desperation into hope in ways that revealed the extraordinary power of love combined with wisdom and careful planning. As I prepared to close this chapter of crisis and recovery, I felt grateful not only for the material benefits of my mother's provisions, but also for the life lessons embedded in her approach to protecting what mattered most. The foundation she had created would support not only my financial security, but also my continued growth into the person she had believed I could become. The phoenix had risen from the ashes, stronger and more beautiful than before, ready to soar toward possibilities that had been invisible from the ground, but were clearly visible from the heights of hard-won wisdom and authentic independence. The transformation from devastated victim to empowered beneficiary required more than simply discovering my mother's hidden provisions. Implementation of Catherine's sophisticated protective strategy demanded courage, persistence, and a complete reimagining of my relationship with conflict and adversity. The woman who had signed documents without understanding their implications was about to become someone who could navigate complex legal proceedings and financial negotiations with confidence and competence. Margaret Reynolds scheduled our first strategic planning meeting for the following Monday morning, giving me the weekend to process the emotional implications of what we were about to undertake. The knowledge that my mother had anticipated Robert's betrayal provided comfort, but the reality of confronting his deception through legal action required a level of assertiveness and determination that felt foreign to my naturally accommodating personality. The weekend passed in a strange mixture of anxiety and excitement as I researched the legal procedures we would be initiating and began developing the mental framework necessary for sustained conflict with someone who had exploited my trust so completely. The comfortable avoidance patterns that had characterized my response to difficult situations throughout my adult life were completely inadequate for the challenges ahead. Margaret's office on Monday morning buzzed with activity as her team prepared. The comprehensive legal filings that would simultaneously challenge Robert's authority to sell estate assets, exercise my purchase option for the family home, and initiate the audit process that would expose the fraudulent representations underlying the entire transaction. The complexity and coordination required revealed the extraordinary preparation Catherine had invested in protecting my interests. Elena, the success of your mother's strategy depends on precise timing and thorough documentation of every step we take, Margaret explained as she reviewed the filing schedule with her associates. Robert's legal representatives will attempt to delay and complicate these proceedings, but we have overwhelming evidence and clear legal authority that will make their resistance ultimately futile. The first filing with the probate court challenged Robert's claim of authority to sell estate assets without proper disclosure to all beneficiaries. The petition included detailed documentation of his misrepresentations regarding estate debts, his failure to notify me of the pending sale, and his unauthorized use of sale proceeds for personal benefit rather than estate settlement purposes. The probate judge's preliminary review of our petition resulted in an immediate temporary restraining order, preventing Robert from disposing of any remaining estate assets pending full investigation of his actions. The order also required him to provide detailed accounting of all transactions he had conducted on behalf of the estate, with particular emphasis on documenting the claimed debts that had supposedly necessitated the property sale. Robert's initial response to the legal action revealed both his arrogance and his fundamental misunderstanding of the evidence arrayed against him. His attorney filed a motion dismissing our petition as an emotional reaction to normal estate settlement procedures, claiming that all his actions had been properly authorized and conducted in the best interests of all beneficiaries. The dismissal motion included sworn affidavits from Robert asserting that he had fully disclosed all estate transactions to me, and that my signatures on the authorization documents demonstrated informed consent to his decisions. The affidavits also claimed that the estate debts requiring property liquidation were legitimate obligations that had been properly documented and verified through independent sources. Margaret's response to Robert's motion was devastating in its thoroughness and precision. Her counterfiling included recorded phone conversations where Robert had explicitly acknowledged that the estate debts were fabricated, bank records showing his personal use of sale proceeds, and testimony from financial advisors confirming that Catherine's estate had been completely solvent at the time of her death. The recorded conversations were particularly damaging because they captured Robert discussing his plans to maximize the financial benefits of Catherine's death, with business associates who had encouraged his deceptive approach to estate settlement. The recordings revealed his calculated manipulation of my grief and confusion to advance his personal financial interests at the expense of my inheritance. The bank records showed that Robert had deposited the $450,000 sale proceeds into his personal accounts rather than estate accounts, then had used the money to pay off his mortgage, purchase a luxury vehicle, and invest in expanding his insurance business. None of the money had been used to satisfy the estate debts he claimed had necessitated the property sale. The testimony from Catherine's financial advisors confirmed that her estate had contained no significant debts beyond routine monthly expenses. and that the property sale had been completely unnecessary for satisfying any legitimate estate obligations. The advisors also testified that Robert had never contacted them to verify estate financial obligations before proceeding with the sale. The probate judge's response to Margaret's evidence filing was swift and decisive. Robert's dismissal motion was denied, his authorization to act on behalf of the estate was revoked, and he was ordered to provide immediate accounting of all estate funds under penalty of contempt of court. The judge also appointed an independent administrator to oversee estate settlement procedures and prevent further unauthorized transactions. The appointment of an independent estate administrator created immediate complications for Robert's financial planning because it froze his access to any remaining estate assets while requiring him to justify his previous transactions through detailed documentation and sworn testimony. The administrator's preliminary review of estate records revealed the extent of his misrepresentations and unauthorized actions. Simultaneously with the probate court proceedings, Margaret initiated the purchase option exercise that would allow me to reclaim ownership of the family home. The option documentation that Catherine had secretly established was ironclad in its legal authority and required only proof that the original estate sale had been conducted without proper beneficiary notification and consent. The purchase option created a fascinating legal dynamic because it enabled me to acquire the property directly from Meridian Holdings rather than attempting to void their ownership rights entirely. This approach protected their legitimate interests as good faith purchasers while allowing me to recover the family home without the delays and uncertainties associated with complex title disputes. Meridian Holdings' legal representatives initially resisted the purchase option exercise, arguing that they had conducted appropriate due diligence before purchasing the property and should not be penalized for Robert's misrepresentations. However, their position changed dramatically when Margaret presented the consulting agreement that gave us audit authority over their transaction. The consulting agreement audit revealed that while Meridian Holdings had followed standard procedures for verifying Robert's authority to sell the property, their investigation had been based entirely on fraudulent documentation he had provided regarding estate debts and beneficiary notifications. The audit findings supported voiding the original transaction while protecting their interests through the purchase option structure. Negotiations with Meridian Holdings proceeded smoothly once they understood that the purchase option provided them with a face-saving exit strategy that would recover their investment costs while avoiding potential liability for participating in a fraudulent transaction. Their cooperation was essential for rapid resolution of the property ownership issues without prolonged litigation. The purchase option exercise required securing financing for the $460,000 purchase price specified in Catherine's documentation. The pre-approved credit facility she had established specifically for this purpose provided immediate access to necessary funds while demonstrating her remarkable foresight in anticipating every aspect of the implementation process. The financing approval process revealed additional layers of Catherine's planning that I had not previously understood. The credit facility was structured as a loan from the Elena Whitmore Foundation Trust to Whitmore Holdings, LLC, which meant that I was essentially borrowing money from myself to purchase the property. The arrangement provided favorable terms, while maintaining all interest payments within the trust structure. The property closing process felt surreal as I signed documents transferring ownership of my childhood home from a development company back to the business entity Catherine had established for my benefit. The circular nature of the transaction demonstrated how thoroughly she had anticipated and planned for Robert's betrayal, while creating mechanisms that would ultimately serve my interests. Margaret's coordination of the various legal proceedings required managing multiple court schedules, regulatory filings, and negotiation processes simultaneously, while ensuring that each component supported the others in achieving our comprehensive objectives. Her expertise and Catherine's detailed preparation combined to create a legal strategy that was both elegant and overwhelmingly effective. The civil lawsuit against Robert for unauthorized conversion of estate assets proceeded parallel to the probate proceedings and provided additional pressure for him to cooperate with asset recovery efforts rather than continuing his defensive strategy. The documented evidence of his deception was so compelling that his legal representatives began indicating willingness to negotiate settlement terms. The settlement negotiations revealed the full extent of Robert's financial vulnerability resulting from his unauthorized use of estate funds. He had spent the sale proceeds on personal expenses and business investments that could not be easily liquidated to satisfy the restitution obligations he faced through the civil lawsuit and probate court orders. Robert's insurance business had been expanded using estate funds in ways that created additional legal complications because the business assets were now commingled with money that rightfully belonged to my inheritance. Unwinding these transactions required forensic accounting and legal proceedings that exposed him to additional penalties and professional sanctions. The resolution of Robert's financial obligations ultimately required him to liquidate substantial personal assets, including his luxury vehicle, business equipment, and investment accounts to satisfy the restitution orders and legal fees resulting from his deceptive actions. The financial consequences of his betrayal far exceeded the temporary benefits he had obtained through unauthorized estate transactions. The emotional satisfaction of watching Robert face the consequences of his deception was overshadowed by my growing appreciation for the wisdom and protection my mother had provided through her sophisticated planning. Every aspect of the implementation process revealed additional evidence of her love and foresight in preparing for circumstances that would have otherwise left me devastated and helpless. The practical skills I developed through participating in the legal proceedings and financial negotiations transformed my understanding of my own capabilities and potential for handling complex challenges. The woman who had signed documents without reading them carefully had become someone who could analyze legal filings, evaluate settlement proposals, and make strategic decisions about matters involving hundreds of thousands of dollars. The professional relationships with Margaret Reynolds and the other advisors Catherine had selected provided ongoing education about legal procedures, financial management, and strategic planning that extended far beyond the immediate needs of recovering my inheritance. These connections became valuable resources for future decision-making and continued learning. The community of professionals who had worked with Catherine during her final months to establish these protections welcomed me into their network with warmth and respect that reflected their admiration for her strategic thinking and their commitment to honoring her legacy. Their support made the challenging legal processes manageable while providing friendship and encouragement. The timeline for completing all aspects of the implementation process was remarkably compressed, considering the complexity of the legal and financial transactions involved. Within 90 days of discovering Catherine's hidden provisions, I owned the family home free and clear, had full access to trust assets exceeding $1 million, and had secured substantial additional recovery through the civil lawsuit against Robert. The successful implementation of Catherine's protective strategy validated her assessment of my character and capabilities in ways that built confidence for future challenges and opportunities. Her trust in my ability to handle these difficult circumstances became a foundation for believing in my potential to achieve goals that had previously seemed beyond my reach. The knowledge that someone had believed in me enough to invest extraordinary time and resources in ensuring my success created obligations to honor that investment through continued growth and contribution to others facing similar challenges. Catherine's strategy had protected not only my financial security, but had also provided a model for using adversity as a catalyst for positive transformation. The completion of the legal proceedings and financial recovery marked the end of the crisis phase of my experience, but represented the beginning of a new chapter focused on building something meaningful with the resources and opportunities Catherine's planning had provided. The foundation was established for pursuing goals that aligned with my values and aspirations, rather than being constrained by financial limitations. Standing in the fully restored Victorian home that now belonged to me, absolutely, surrounded by the garden my mother had created and nurtured, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the protection she had provided and responsibility for using her gifts wisely in building a future that would honor her memory and serve others who might face similar betrayals. The strategic implementation of Catherine's protective plan had transformed my apparent devastation into genuine empowerment, while teaching invaluable lessons about resilience, preparation, and the extraordinary power of love combined with wisdom and careful planning. The phoenix had not merely risen from the ashes, but had emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable than ever before. The morning I received the final documentation, confirming my complete ownership of both the family home and the trust assets, marked the beginning of a profound transformation that extended far beyond material recovery. Standing in the Victorian house that now belonged to me absolutely, with financial resources that provided genuine independence and security, I faced the exhilarating and intimidating challenge of building a future worthy of the extraordinary sacrifices my mother had made to protect me. The immediate aftermath of successfully implementing Catherine's protective strategy brought a period of emotional processing that was necessary before I could begin making constructive use of the opportunities her planning had created. The trauma of Robert's betrayal, the stress of months of legal proceedings, and the overwhelming gratitude for my mother's foresight required careful integration before I could approach my future with clarity and confidence. Margaret Reynolds suggested that I take several weeks to adjust to my changed circumstances before making any significant decisions about education, career changes, or major investments. Her advice reflected wisdom gained through representing other clients who had experienced similar windfalls and needed time to develop appropriate frameworks for managing sudden wealth and expanded opportunities. The psychological adjustment to financial independence proved more complex than I had anticipated. The security of knowing that I could pursue any educational program, career path, or entrepreneurial venture without concern for basic survival needs was liberating, but it also created decision-making challenges that I had never previously faced. The abundance of possibilities required developing new criteria for evaluating options and setting priorities. The trust structure Catherine had established provided substantial monthly distributions while preserving principal for long-term growth and major capital expenditures. The income stream was sufficient to support a comfortable lifestyle without employment, but my desire to honor her investment in my future through meaningful contribution required identifying purposes that would generate both personal fulfillment and positive social impact. The first major decision involved determining whether to continue working at the consulting firm where I had been employed throughout the crisis period. My colleagues had been supportive during the legal proceedings, but my changed financial circumstances created subtle shifts in workplace relationships that made me question whether remaining in a junior marketing role aligned with my expanded opportunities and responsibilities. The consulting firm position had provided valuable experience in project management, client communications, and strategic planning, but the work itself had never generated the passionate engagement that I observed in colleagues who had found their true professional calling. The financial independence from the trust allowed me to explore career alternatives that prioritized meaningful work over immediate income considerations. After extensive reflection and consultation with Margaret Reynolds and other trusted advisors, I decided to pursue graduate education in nonprofit management and social entrepreneurship. The decision represented both personal development investment and preparation for creating organizations that would honor Catherine's legacy through serving others who faced similar challenges with estate fraud and family betrayal. The graduate program application process required articulating my career goals and explaining how my recent experiences had shaped my understanding of social justice issues and community service opportunities. Writing these essays provided valuable clarity about the transformation I had undergone and the direction I wanted my future contributions to take. Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management offered an innovative program combining traditional business education with specialized training in nonprofit leadership and social impact measurement. The curriculum aligned perfectly with my interests in developing sustainable organizations that could address systemic problems rather than merely providing temporary assistance to individual victims. The program's emphasis on strategic planning, financial management, and stakeholder engagement would provide professional capabilities that complemented the practical experience I had gained through managing the legal and financial aspects of recovering my inheritance. The combination of academic knowledge and real-world application would prepare me for leadership roles in organizations addressing complex social problems. The decision to pursue full-time graduate study required careful financial planning to ensure that the trust assets would support both educational expenses and living costs without compromising long-term security. The trust structure Catherine had established anticipated such investments in my development and provided flexible distributions that could accommodate varying needs throughout different life phases. The application process also required letters of recommendation from professional contacts who could attest to my capabilities and potential for success in demanding academic and leadership environments. Margaret Reynolds provided a powerful recommendation highlighting the maturity and strategic thinking I had demonstrated throughout the legal proceedings, while my former supervisor at the consulting firm emphasized my project management skills and collaborative approach to problem-solving. The acceptance letter from Northwestern arrived on a crisp October morning 6 months after the final resolution of the legal proceedings against Robert. The opportunity to begin graduate studies in January provided perfect timing for transitioning from crisis recovery to proactive career development, while maintaining the momentum generated through successfully implementing Catherine's protective strategy. The period between acceptance and enrollment provided valuable time for developing relationships with other incoming students and faculty members, while conducting preliminary research into the specific social problems I hope to address through my future career. The networking opportunities revealed the collaborative potential inherent in graduate education and professional development programs. The orientation process at Northwestern introduced me to classmates whose diverse backgrounds and experiences created a rich learning environment that challenged assumptions and expanded perspectives on social change strategies. Many had worked in corporate settings before deciding to pursue careers focused on social impact, while others brought experience from nonprofit organizations, government agencies, or international development programs. The academic coursework proved intellectually demanding in ways that engaged capabilities I had never previously tested or developed. Financial analysis, organizational behavior, strategic planning, and policy development required analytical thinking and communication skills that built upon but extended far beyond the competencies I had developed in my previous professional experience. The case study methodology emphasized collaborative problem-solving and required defending recommendations based on thorough analysis of complex situations involving multiple stakeholders with competing interests. These exercises provided excellent preparation for the real-world challenges of leading organizations that must balance diverse constituency needs while achieving measurable social impact. The specialized coursework in nonprofit management addressed the unique challenges of organizations that measure success through social outcomes rather than financial profits. Understanding how to develop sustainable funding strategies, manage volunteer workforces, and maintain accountability to both donors and beneficiaries provided essential foundation knowledge for my intended career direction. The social entrepreneurship component of the curriculum focused on innovative approaches to addressing persistent social problems through market-based solutions that could achieve scale and sustainability. These concepts were particularly relevant to my interest in developing systematic responses to estate fraud and family financial abuse that could prevent others from experiencing the devastation I had narrowly avoided. The practicum component of the graduate program required working with established nonprofit organizations to apply classroom learning to real-world challenges while contributing meaningful value to organizations serving vulnerable populations. I selected an internship with the Chicago Legal Aid Society, specifically working with their estate planning and elder law division. The Legal Aid Society internship provided direct exposure to the challenges faced by individuals who lacked the resources, and protective planning that had enabled my recovery from Robert's betrayal. Many clients were elderly individuals whose family members had exploited their trust in ways similar to my experience, but without the sophisticated legal protections Catherine had established. Working with legal aid clients revealed the systemic nature of family financial abuse and the inadequacy of existing resources for both prevention and recovery. The legal system provided remedies for documented fraud, but the complexity and cost of pursuing these remedies often exceeded the capacity of victims who were already dealing with emotional trauma and financial devastation. The internship experience crystallized my understanding of the specific problem I wanted to address through my future career. There was a clear need for organizations that could provide both preventive education about estate planning protections and rapid response assistance for families facing financial abuse by trusted individuals. The combination of legal expertise, financial counseling, and emotional support required for effectively serving this population suggested the need for innovative service delivery models that could integrate multiple disciplines while maintaining accessibility for individuals with limited resources. The challenge was developing approaches that could achieve both comprehensive impact and financial sustainability. The thesis project I developed during my final semester at Northwestern proposed establishing a network of family financial protection centers that would provide education, prevention, and recovery services for individuals facing financial abuse by family members or trusted advisors. The business plan incorporated lessons learned from Catherine's protective strategy while addressing the broader population that lacked access to sophisticated legal and financial planning. The thesis defense process required presenting the organizational concept to faculty members and industry experts who challenged assumptions about market demand, competitive positioning, and operational feasibility. The rigorous examination strengthened the proposal while identifying implementation challenges that would require careful attention during the startup phase. The graduation ceremony in June represented both completion of academic preparation and the beginning of practical implementation of the vision I had developed throughout the program. The relationships formed with classmates, faculty members, and internship supervisors created a professional network that would provide ongoing support and collaboration opportunities throughout my career. The summer following graduation provided time for transitioning the thesis concept into a concrete implementation plan while securing the initial funding and partnerships necessary for establishing the first Family Financial Protection Center. The trust assets Catherine had provided would support both personal living expenses and organizational startup costs during the critical initial phase. The site selection process focused on identifying locations where the target population was concentrated and existing services were inadequate to meet demonstrated needs. Chicago's diverse neighborhoods provided multiple opportunities for establishing pilot programs that could serve different demographic groups while testing various service delivery approaches. The first Family Financial Protection Center opened in September in a renovated storefront in the Pilsen neighborhood, chosen for its accessibility to both English and Spanish-speaking residents who faced language barriers in accessing traditional legal and financial services. The location provided visibility and convenience while maintaining the welcoming atmosphere essential for serving vulnerable populations. The staffing model combined full-time professional positions in legal advocacy and financial counseling, with part-time roles for community outreach and administrative support. This structure provided comprehensive service capabilities while maintaining operational efficiency and cost-effectiveness during the startup phase. The service offerings included educational workshops on estate planning and financial protection, individual consultations for families concerned about potential abuse, and rapid response assistance for individuals who had already experienced financial exploitation by trusted parties. The integrated approach addressed both prevention and recovery while building community awareness about available resources. The community response to the center's opening exceeded all projections, with workshop attendance consistently at capacity, and individual consultation requests requiring expanded scheduling within the first month of operations. The demand confirmed the accuracy of the needs assessment, while highlighting the urgency of developing additional capacity and locations. The success of the pilot program attracted attention from other nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and philanthropic foundations interested in supporting innovative approaches to elder abuse prevention and family financial protection. These relationships provided both funding opportunities and partnership possibilities for expanding service delivery. The measurement and evaluation systems developed for tracking center impact provided concrete evidence of effectiveness while identifying areas for service improvement and expansion. Client feedback consistently emphasized the value of integrated services and the importance of culturally sensitive approaches to addressing financial abuse concerns. The first annual report documented services provided to over 400 families during the initial year of operations, with measurable outcomes including successful recovery of assets, prevention of financial exploitation, and improved family communication about estate planning issues. These results provided compelling evidence for continued funding and program expansion. The foundation Catherine had unknowingly created through her protective planning had evolved into an organization serving hundreds of families while honoring her memory through preventing others from experiencing the devastation that her foresight had helped me avoid. The inheritance she had protected had become the catalyst for systematic social change that would benefit countless individuals for generations to come. Standing in the Family Financial Protection Center on the first anniversary of its opening, surrounded by staff members serving clients who might otherwise have lacked access to essential protections, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had transformed personal crisis into purposeful career and meaningful social contribution. The phoenix had risen from the ashes to become a beacon of hope and protection for others facing similar challenges. The success of the first Family Financial Protection Center in Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood created both opportunities and obligations that required strategic thinking about sustainable growth while maintaining service quality and organizational mission alignment. The demand for services consistently exceeded capacity, with waiting lists for individual consultations extending several weeks and community workshop attendance requiring larger venues to accommodate interested participants. The challenge of scaling operations while preserving the personalized approach that distinguished our services from traditional social service organizations required developing systematic frameworks for staff training, quality assurance, and performance measurement. The organizational culture that had emerged during the startup phase needed codification and institutionalization to ensure consistency across multiple locations and service delivery teams. The second center location opened 18 months after the initial pilot program in the Auburn-Gresham neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. This expansion served a predominantly African American community, where cultural factors created unique challenges for addressing financial abuse and estate planning concerns. The service delivery model required adaptation to address specific cultural sensitivities while maintaining the core programmatic elements that had proven effective in the initial location. The Auburn-Gresham Center development process involved extensive community engagement and partnership building with local churches, community organizations, and informal leadership networks that influenced neighborhood residents' willingness to seek assistance with sensitive family financial matters. These relationships proved essential for establishing credibility and generating appropriate referrals from trusted community sources. The staffing model for the second location emphasized hiring from within the community while ensuring appropriate professional qualifications and cultural competency for serving vulnerable populations. This approach created employment opportunities for community members while building authentic connections between service providers and the populations they served. The service delivery innovations developed through operating two centers in demographically distinct communities provided valuable insights into the universal and culturally specific aspects of family financial protection needs. These learnings informed the development of standardized protocols that could be adapted for different cultural contexts while maintaining consistent quality and effectiveness. The documentation and evaluation systems established for tracking Organizational impact attracted attention from academic researchers studying innovative approaches to elder abuse, prevention, and family financial protection. The University of Chicago's School of Social Service Administration initiated a longitudinal study of client outcomes that would provide rigorous evidence of program effectiveness while contributing to broader knowledge about best practices in this field. The research partnership with the University of Chicago created opportunities for staff professional development through participation in academic conferences and publication of findings in peer-reviewed journals. These activities enhanced organizational credibility while contributing to the broader field of social work and legal advocacy, focused on financial abuse prevention. The third center location opened in the Logan Square neighborhood, serving a diverse population, including recent immigrants who faced language barriers and cultural differences that created additional vulnerabilities to financial exploitation by family members or trusted community figures. The multilingual service delivery capabilities developed for this location required hiring staff with specialized language skills and cultural knowledge. The Logan Square Center introduced innovative programming focused on financial literacy education for immigrant families, addressing the gap between traditional American estate planning approaches and the cultural expectations and practices that new Americans brought from their countries of origin. These programs required developing educational materials that were both culturally sensitive and legally accurate. The expansion to 3 centers created operational complexities that required developing centralized administrative systems while maintaining local autonomy for programming and community engagement activities. The organizational structure evolved to balance efficiency with responsiveness to diverse community needs and cultural contexts. The success of the Chicago-based centers generated inquiries from social service organizations and community leaders in other metropolitan areas interested in replicating the service delivery model in their regions. These requests created opportunities for organizational growth while requiring careful consideration of resource allocation and quality control across multiple geographic markets. The first out-of-state expansion occurred in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where demographic similarities to Chicago and an established network of community partners provided favorable conditions for successful program implementation. The Milwaukee Center opened as a franchise operation that maintained programmatic consistency while allowing for local adaptation and community ownership of service delivery. The franchise model development required creating comprehensive training materials, operational manuals, and quality assurance systems that would ensure consistent service delivery across locations operated by different organizational entities. These systems needed to balance standardization with flexibility for local adaptation based on community characteristics and regulatory requirements. The success of the Milwaukee franchise led to additional expansion opportunities in Detroit, Cleveland, and Indianapolis, creating a network of family financial protection centers serving similar communities throughout the Midwest region. Each location contributed to the collective knowledge base while serving distinct populations with unique cultural and economic characteristics. The organizational growth attracted recognition from national foundations and government agencies interested in supporting innovative approaches to elder abuse, prevention, and family financial protection. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation provided a significant multi-year grant to support expansion activities while funding rigorous evaluation of program outcomes and cost-effectiveness. The Federal Administration on Aging selected the Family Financial Protection Center network as a demonstration project for innovative service delivery models that could be replicated in other regions. This recognition provided additional funding opportunities while creating obligations for documentation and evaluation that would contribute to national policy development in this area. The national recognition generated invitations for me to speak at professional conferences, congressional hearings, and academic symposiums about innovative approaches to addressing financial abuse of vulnerable populations. These platforms provided opportunities to advocate for policy changes while sharing best practices with other organizations working in related fields. The speaking engagements and policy advocacy work revealed systemic issues in existing legal and regulatory frameworks that created barriers to effective financial abuse prevention and response. These insights informed the development of policy recommendations that could address structural problems while supporting the direct service work being conducted through the center network. The policy advocacy component of organizational activities led to partnerships with national organizations including the National Adult Protective Services Association, the American Bar Association's Commission on Law and Aging, and AARP's Public Policy Institute. These collaborations enhanced organizational influence while contributing to coordinated advocacy efforts for protective legislation and regulatory reforms. The research and evaluation activities, supported by foundation grants and academic partnerships, produced evidence demonstrating significant cost savings to the healthcare and social service systems through prevention of financial abuse and its associated negative health and social outcomes. These findings provided compelling arguments for continued public and private investment in prevention-focused programming. The 5th anniversary of the first center opening marked a significant milestone in organizational development and impact measurement. The network had grown to 12 centers in 6 states, serving over 5,000 families annually with documented outcomes including recovery of millions of dollars in assets and prevention of countless cases of financial exploitation. Chopper anniversary celebration brought together staff members, community partners, clients, and supporters from across the network to recognize achievements while planning for continued expansion and service enhancement. The event provided opportunities for sharing success stories and best practices, while building connections that would support future collaborative efforts. The client testimonials shared during the anniversary celebration provided powerful evidence of organizational impact beyond statistical measures. Families described how center services had not only prevented financial losses, but had also strengthened family relationships through improved communication about estate planning and financial decision-making processes. One particularly moving testimonial came from Maria Santos, an elderly widow whose adult children had been attempting to pressure her into transferring ownership of her home to avoid potential nursing home costs. The center's legal advocacy team had provided education about legitimate estate planning options, while helping Maria establish appropriate protections that preserved her autonomy while addressing her family's concerns about long-term care planning. Another client, James Mitchell, shared how center services had helped him recover over $200,000 that had been stolen by a nephew who had gained access to his financial accounts through deceptive means. The legal advocacy and financial counseling provided through the center had not only facilitated asset recovery, but had also helped James establish protective measures that would prevent future exploitation. The anniversary event also featured recognition of staff members whose dedication and innovation had contributed significantly to organizational success and client outcomes. The professional development opportunities provided through the organization had enabled many staff members to advance their careers while continuing to serve vulnerable populations through the center network. The media coverage of the anniversary celebration generated additional recognition for organizational achievements, while raising public awareness about financial abuse issues and available resources for prevention and response. The television and newspaper coverage resulted in increased service requests, while attracting additional volunteer and donor support for expansion activities. The success of the Family Financial Protection Center network attracted acquisition interest from larger social service organizations and healthcare systems interested in integrating financial abuse prevention services into their existing programming. While these opportunities represented potential resources for expansion, they also raised questions about maintaining organizational independence and mission focus. The decision to remain independent while pursuing strategic partnerships that could enhance service delivery capabilities reflected the commitment to preserving organizational values and approaches that had proven effective in serving vulnerable populations. The partnerships provided access to additional resources and expertise while maintaining local control over service delivery and community engagement activities. The development of online service delivery capabilities during the COVID-19 pandemic created opportunities for expanding access to educational programming and consultation services beyond the geographic limitations of physical center locations. The virtual programming reached clients who faced transportation or mobility barriers, while providing cost-effective approaches to delivering certain types of services. The online programming innovations included webinar series on estate planning basics, virtual support groups for families dealing with financial abuse recovery, and telehealth consultation services for individuals who preferred remote access to professional guidance. These services complemented rather than replaced in-person programming while expanding organizational reach and impact. The technology investments required for virtual service delivery also enhanced organizational capacity for data collection, outcome measurement, and program evaluation activities. The integrated client management systems provided comprehensive tracking of service utilization and outcomes, while supporting coordination across multiple service delivery locations and modalities. The 7th anniversary of organizational founding marked another significant milestone with the announcement of a major expansion initiative supported by a $10 million grant from the MacArthur Foundation. The funding would support establishment of 15 additional centers over 3 years, while funding comprehensive evaluation of program effectiveness and cost-benefit analysis. The MacArthur Foundation recognition as a leader in social innovation provided validation of organizational approaches, while creating obligations for rigorous documentation and evaluation that would contribute to broader knowledge about effective strategies for addressing financial abuse and family financial protection needs. The expansion planning process involved extensive community needs assessment and stakeholder engagement in potential new service locations to ensure appropriate adaptation of service delivery models for different demographic and cultural contexts. The planning phase emphasized community ownership and partnership development, rather than top-down implementation of standardized programming. The organizational growth trajectory had transformed the initial response to personal crisis into a nationally recognized innovation in social service delivery that was improving outcomes for thousands of families while contributing to systemic changes in how society addresses financial abuse of vulnerable populations. Standing in the original Pilsen Center on the 7th anniversary of its opening, surrounded by staff members serving clients who represented the ongoing need for the services my mother's protection had enabled me to create, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from personal devastation to meaningful contribution that had defined the previous decade of my life. The inheritance Robert had attempted to steal had become the foundation for protecting thousands of other families from similar devastation, while honoring Catherine's memory through systematic prevention of the harm she had worked so hard to shield me from experiencing. The phoenix had risen from the ashes to become a catalyst for transformation that extended far beyond individual recovery to create lasting positive change for vulnerable communities across the nation. The 10th anniversary of the Family Financial Protection Center network marked a profound transformation in both the scale of organizational impact and my evolution from local service provider to national thought leader in financial abuse prevention and family protection policy. The network had expanded to 37 centers across 15 states, serving over 12,000 families annually, while maintaining the personalized approach and cultural sensitivity that had characterized our work from the beginning. The invitation to testify before the Senate Special Committee on Aging represented recognition of the expertise and credibility that had developed through a decade of direct service provision, research collaboration, and policy advocacy work. The hearing focused on proposed federal legislation that would strengthen protections for vulnerable adults against financial exploitation by family members and trusted advisors. My testimony drew extensively on the client experiences and outcomes documented through the center network, providing concrete evidence of both the prevalence of family financial abuse and the effectiveness of comprehensive prevention and response services. The data we had collected demonstrated that early intervention services could prevent an average of $47,000 in financial losses per family, while reducing associated healthcare and social service costs by 32%. The congressional testimony also addressed systemic barriers in existing legal and regulatory frameworks that limited the effectiveness of current protective measures. The fragmented nature of elder protection services, inconsistent enforcement of existing laws, and lack of coordination between financial institutions, healthcare providers, and social service agencies created gaps that sophisticated financial predators could exploit with minimal risk of detection or consequences. The policy recommendations I presented to the committee were based on 10 years of practical experience, identifying the most effective intervention strategies and the most significant obstacles to successful protection of vulnerable populations. The recommendations emphasized prevention through education, rapid response capabilities for families experiencing active exploitation, and systemic reforms that would improve coordination among relevant agencies and institutions. The Senate hearing generated significant media attention that elevated national awareness of family financial abuse issues, while highlighting the innovative approaches being implemented through the center network. The coverage in major newspapers, television news programs, and policy publications created opportunities for broader public education, while attracting additional funding and partnership opportunities for continued expansion. The media attention also generated speaking invitations from professional associations, academic institutions, and international organizations interested in understanding how the service delivery model could be adapted for different cultural and regulatory contexts. These presentations provided platforms for sharing best practices while learning from colleagues working in related fields across diverse geographic and cultural settings. The international interest in our approach led to a consulting relationship with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, which was developing global strategies for addressing elder abuse and financial exploitation in developing countries. The consultation work required adapting service delivery concepts for contexts with limited legal infrastructure and different cultural approaches to family relationships and financial decision-making. The UN consultation project resulted in the development of a comprehensive toolkit for establishing family financial protection services in diverse cultural and economic contexts. The toolkit included adaptable training materials, service delivery protocols, and evaluation frameworks that could be customized for local conditions while maintaining core principles of prevention, early intervention, and client empowerment. The success of the international consulting work attracted additional opportunities for global engagement, including partnerships with organizations in Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom that were developing similar approaches to family financial protection. These collaborations created opportunities for comparative research and cross-cultural learning that enhanced the effectiveness of services in all participating countries. The research collaborations with international partners contributed to a growing body of academic literature documenting effective approaches to financial abuse prevention and response. The publications in peer-reviewed journals established the Center Network as a leading source of evidence-based practices while contributing to professional education and training programs in social work, law, and healthcare. The academic recognition led to appointments as a visiting lecturer at several universities, including my alma mater, Northwestern University, where I taught courses on social entrepreneurship and nonprofit management. The teaching opportunities provided occasions for mentoring the next generation of social service leaders, while staying connected to emerging research and innovative approaches being developed by academic colleagues. The university appointments also created opportunities for establishing research centers focused on family financial protection and elder abuse prevention. The Northwestern University Center for Family Financial Security, which I helped establish with support from the Center Network's foundation partners, became a leading source of research and policy analysis in this field. The research center's work included longitudinal studies of client outcomes, cost-benefit analyses of prevention versus response strategies, and policy evaluations of various legislative and regulatory approaches to addressing financial abuse. The research findings consistently demonstrated the superior effectiveness and cost efficiency of prevention-focused approaches compared to traditional crisis response models. The evidence generated through the research center's work provided compelling support for the federal legislation that had been under consideration since my Senate testimony. The Elder Financial Protection Act, which incorporated many of the policy recommendations from our testimony, was enacted with bipartisan support and provided federal funding for replication of effective prevention programs. The federal legislation created the Office of Elder Financial Protection within the Department of Health and Human Services, with responsibility for coordinating anti-abuse efforts across federal agencies and supporting innovative prevention programs at the state and local levels. The office was charged with developing national standards for service delivery and establishing a competitive grant program to support program expansion and replication. My appointment as the first director of the Office of Elder Financial Protection represented both recognition of the expertise developed through the center network and an opportunity to influence national policy implementation at the federal level. The position required temporarily stepping back from direct oversight of the center network, while maintaining strategic involvement in organizational development and expansion planning. The federal appointment created opportunities for systemic change that extended far beyond the direct service impact of the center network. The office developed national training standards for professionals working in elder protection, established data collection and reporting requirements that improved understanding of abuse prevalence, and created funding mechanisms that supported innovative prevention programs across the country. The office's work included development of the National Elder Financial Protection Strategy, a comprehensive framework for coordinating federal, state, and local efforts to prevent financial abuse, while improving response capabilities for families experiencing exploitation. The strategy emphasized collaboration among healthcare providers, financial institutions, legal advocates, and social service agencies. The implementation of the national strategy required extensive stakeholder engagement and partnership building with organizations that had not previously been involved in elder protection efforts. The healthcare industry, banking sector, and technology companies all had roles to play in creating systemic protections that would reduce opportunities for financial exploitation while improving detection and response capabilities. The partnership with the financial services industry resulted in the development of new technologies and protocols for identifying suspicious account activity that might indicate financial abuse. The early warning systems created through these collaborations prevented millions of dollars in losses while providing rapid response capabilities for families experiencing active exploitation. The healthcare partnerships focused on training medical professionals to recognize signs of financial abuse and establishing referral protocols that would connect concerned families with appropriate legal and social service resources. The training programs reached over 50,000 healthcare workers during the first 2 years of implementation. The technology partnerships led to the development of secure communication platforms that allowed vulnerable adults to report concerns about potential financial exploitation while maintaining confidentiality and protection from retaliation. The platforms included multilingual capabilities and accessibility features that ensured broad usability across diverse populations. The success of the federal program implementation attracted international attention and created opportunities for exporting American innovations in elder protection to other countries. The State Department included elder financial protection in its international development assistance programs, supporting the establishment of similar programs in countries with aging populations and emerging concerns about family financial abuse. The international work culminated in the development of the Global Alliance for Elder Financial Protection, a collaborative network of organizations from 23 countries working to share best practices and coordinate policy approaches to addressing financial abuse of vulnerable adults. The alliance became a leading voice in international policy discussions about aging populations and protective services. The 5th anniversary of the federal office's establishment provided an opportunity to evaluate the national impact of the elder financial protection initiatives that had grown from the original center network concept. The data demonstrated remarkable success in both prevention and response outcomes, with documented savings to families and taxpayers exceeding $2 billion while serving over 100,000 families annually. The program evaluation also revealed ongoing challenges and opportunities for continued improvement. The need for culturally adapted services remained significant, particularly for immigrant communities and populations with limited English proficiency. The rural service delivery remained challenging due to geographic barriers and limited local resources. The lessons learned from 5 years of federal program administration informed the development of the next generation of elder protection initiatives, including enhanced technology solutions, expanded partnership networks, and more sophisticated approaches to addressing the complex intersection of financial abuse with other forms of elder maltreatment. The transition from federal service back to direct involvement with the center network after completing my term as director provided opportunities for applying the policy and systems-level experience to enhance the effectiveness of grassroots service delivery. The combination of direct service experience and federal policy expertise created unique capabilities for addressing elder protection challenges at multiple levels simultaneously. The return to the center network coincided with celebration of the 15th anniversary of the original Pilsen Center opening. The milestone event brought together hundreds of staff members, clients, community partners, and supporters to recognize achievements while planning for the next phase of organizational development and expansion. The anniversary celebration featured testimonials from clients whose lives had been transformed through center services, including several individuals who had gone on to become advocates and leaders in their own communities. The ripple effects of protection and empowerment had extended far beyond individual families to create broader cultural changes in how communities approached elder protection and family financial planning. One particularly moving testimonial came from Dr. Patricia Williams, an elderly physician whose family had attempted to exploit her cognitive decline to gain control of her substantial assets. The center's legal advocacy and care coordination had not only protected her finances, but had also enabled her to maintain her independence while receiving appropriate support for managing her health conditions. Another testimonial was provided by the Santos family, whose experience with attempted financial exploitation had motivated them to establish a community education program that had reached over 3,000 families in their neighborhood. Their transformation from victims to advocates demonstrated the multiplier effect of effective protection services. The anniversary celebration also featured recognition of the research and policy achievements that had grown from the original direct service mission. The establishment of the federal office, the international collaborations, and the academic partnerships had created systemic changes that complemented and enhanced the impact of direct service provision. The announcement of the next phase expansion plan represented the most ambitious growth initiative in organizational history. The plan called for establishing 100 additional centers over 5 years, while developing specialized services for underserved populations, including rural communities, immigrant families, and individuals with disabilities. The expansion plan also included the development of a national training institute that would provide professional development opportunities for staff members throughout the network, while establishing certification programs for practitioners working in elder financial protection. The institute would ensure consistent quality standards while supporting career advancement for dedicated professionals in this field. The funding for the expansion initiative combined support from federal grants, foundation partnerships, and earned revenue from consulting and training services. The diversified funding approach provided sustainability while maintaining independence from any single funding source that might compromise organizational mission or service delivery approaches. The selection of sites for new center locations emphasized geographic diversity and community readiness while prioritizing areas with demonstrated need and limited existing services. The expansion process included extensive community engagement and partnership development to ensure local ownership and cultural appropriateness of service delivery. The staff development for the expansion initiative required creating comprehensive training programs that could prepare new team members while maintaining the organizational culture and service quality that had characterized the network from its beginning. The training programs combined online learning modules with intensive in-person workshops and mentoring relationships with experienced staff members. The evaluation framework for the expansion phase included both quantitative outcome measures and qualitative assessments of community impact and cultural adaptation. The evaluation design would provide evidence of effectiveness while identifying opportunities for continuous improvement in service delivery approaches. Standing in the original Pilsen Center during the 15th anniversary celebration, surrounded by staff members serving clients who represented the ongoing need for protective services, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had occurred since discovering my mother's hidden provisions 15 years earlier. The personal crisis that had threatened to destroy my future had become the catalyst for creating systematic protections that had served tens of thousands of families, while contributing to national policy changes that would benefit countless others. The inheritance that Robert had attempted to steal had been transformed into a legacy that far exceeded the financial value of the assets my mother had worked to protect. Her foresight and love had created not only individual security, but also the foundation for innovations that would continue protecting vulnerable families for generations to come. The journey from devastated betrayal victim to national leader in elder protection had demonstrated that personal adversity, when met with courage and commitment to serving others, could become the foundation for extraordinary contributions that extend far beyond individual recovery to create lasting positive change for entire communities and populations. The phoenix had risen from the ashes to become not merely a survivor, but a protector, ensuring that the trust and love that had enabled recovery would continue blessing others facing similar challenges, while honoring the memory of those whose sacrifices had made such transformation possible. 20 years after discovering my mother's hidden provisions in that desperate moment of betrayal and loss, I stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York City, delivering the keynote address for the International Day of Older Persons. The theme of the assembly focused on global strategies for protecting vulnerable aging populations from financial exploitation, and my presence at this podium represented the culmination of a journey that had transformed personal devastation into worldwide impact. The speech I delivered that October morning drew from 2 decades of experience building protective services that had served over 200,000 families across 4 continents. The Family Financial Protection Center network had evolved into a global movement that influenced policy in 37 countries while maintaining the grassroots community engagement that had characterized our work from the beginning. The United Nations recognition reflected the systematic change that had emerged from Catherine's protective strategy and my commitment to honoring her legacy through service to others facing similar vulnerabilities. The personal crisis that had once threatened to destroy my future had become the foundation for innovations that were now considered international best practices in elder protection and family financial security. The General Assembly address provided an opportunity to reflect on the principles that had guided this transformation while articulating a vision for continued progress in protecting vulnerable populations from financial exploitation. The speech emphasized the critical importance of prevention-focused approaches that address systemic vulnerabilities rather than merely responding to individual cases of abuse after harm had occurred. The international audience included representatives from governments, non-governmental organizations, academic institutions, and advocacy groups who shared common concerns about aging populations and the increasing sophistication of financial predators who targeted vulnerable adults. The collaborative potential represented in that assembly room demonstrated how individual experiences could contribute to collective solutions when shared through appropriate channels. The presentation included case studies from Center Network, operations that illustrated both the universal nature of family financial exploitation and the cultural adaptations necessary for effective intervention across diverse contexts. The examples demonstrated how basic protective principles could be implemented through different service delivery models while maintaining core commitments to client empowerment and family preservation. The policy recommendations I presented to the General Assembly had been developed through consultation with practitioners, researchers, and policy experts from across the global network. The recommendations emphasized the need for coordinated international standards, enhanced information sharing among protective agencies, and systematic investment in prevention-focused programming that could reduce both individual harm and societal costs. The response from Assembly delegates reflected both the urgency of addressing these issues and the recognition that effective solutions required sustained commitment to developing comprehensive protective systems rather than fragmented interventions. Several countries announced intentions to develop national elder protection strategies based on the frameworks we had developed through the Center network. The Assembly proceedings were broadcast globally and generated significant media coverage. That elevated international awareness of elder financial abuse while highlighting the effectiveness of prevention-focused approaches. The coverage resulted in additional partnership opportunities and funding commitments that would support continued expansion of protective services worldwide. The return flight from New York to Chicago provided time for reflection on the extraordinary trajectory that had brought me from personal crisis to international recognition, while maintaining focus on the grassroots service delivery that remained the foundation of meaningful impact. The airplane window view of the American landscape below reminded me of the communities across the country where Center staff members continued providing daily protection and support to vulnerable families. The 20th anniversary celebration of the original Pilsen Center was scheduled for the following month, providing an opportunity to reconnect with the local community roots that had sustained our work throughout periods of rapid growth and increasing complexity. The celebration would honor both the achievements of the past 2 decades and the commitment to continued innovation in serving vulnerable populations. The anniversary planning process revealed the remarkable stability and continuity that had characterized our organizational culture despite dramatic expansion in scale and scope. Many staff members had remained with the organization for over a decade, developing deep expertise while maintaining the passion for service that had attracted them to this work initially. The client testimonials prepared for the anniversary celebration provided powerful evidence of sustained impact that extended across multiple generations of families served through the Center network. Adult children described how protective services had preserved family relationships while securing their parents' financial security. Grandchildren shared stories of educational opportunities made possible through assets protected from exploitation. One particularly moving testimonial came from the Rodriguez family, whose grandmother had been one of the first clients served by the original Pilsen Center. The protective services had not only prevented financial exploitation, but had also enabled the grandmother to maintain her independence while providing educational support for her grandchildren, who were now college graduates pursuing careers in social service and legal advocacy. Another testimonial was provided by the Chen family, whose experience with attempted exploitation had motivated them to establish a community foundation focused on elder protection education. Their foundation had provided scholarships for students pursuing careers in elder law and social work while funding research into innovative protection strategies. The anniversary celebration also featured recognition of community partners whose collaboration had been essential for effective service delivery throughout the network's development. Healthcare providers, legal professionals, financial institutions, and community organizations had contributed expertise and resources that enhanced protective capabilities while building comprehensive support systems for vulnerable families. The announcement of the next phase strategic plan during the anniversary celebration represented the most ambitious expansion initiative in organizational history. The plan called for establishing protective services in 50 additional countries, while developing specialized programming for emerging threats including digital financial exploitation and cross-border family financial abuse. The strategic plan also included creation of the Global Institute for Family Financial Security an international training and research center that would provide professional development opportunities for practitioners worldwide while conducting research into emerging trends and effective intervention strategies. The institute would ensure consistent quality standards while supporting innovation and adaptation for diverse cultural contexts. The funding for this ambitious expansion combined support from international development agencies, philanthropic foundations, and earned revenue from consulting and training services provided to governments and organizations worldwide. The diversified funding approach provided sustainability while maintaining independence from any single source that might compromise organizational mission or service delivery approaches. The selection of countries for new program development emphasized regions with aging populations, emerging concerns about financial exploitation, and governmental commitment to developing protective services. The expansion process included extensive cultural adaptation and partnership development to ensure local ownership and sustainability of protective programming. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.